Hey guys, welcome back to Andrew Upshaw Fishing. Last week we hit 7,000 subscribers and we're already over 7,300 this week. I don't really know what's going on, but it's incredible. Thank you all so much for watching these videos. I really do appreciate it. In the meantime, if you haven't yet and you're a new watcher or a new viewer of my channel, hit that subscribe button. It's right down there in that bottom right hand corner. I really do appreciate it. It's just a little small red square. But today we're going to talk about gear ratios, something that's extremely overlooked in the bass fishing world. You know, don't get me wrong, there's going to be quite a few of you and you're like, oh man, I pay attention to gear ratios, but it can be confusing for some. The deal is sometimes people use a reel that's way too fast for certain techniques and sometimes way too slow. I remember when I first started, and I mean, it's been years ago, but I was using a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel throwing a Carolina rig. It was like nearly impossible to keep up with that thing. I mean, you're like, just to catch up the line to set the hook. So we all make those little fatal mistakes when we're out there fishing. And hopefully in this particular show, it will help you figure out exactly what gear ratio reel that you need, even if you only have 1 or 2 reels, for the next time that you go fishing right after this.
Shut up and sit down.
Oh, he slacklined it again. That's a better one. No. You know, there's one thing about it. Bass fishermen have a tendency to overcomplicate things. I'm definitely one of those people. I've had a tendency to overcomplicate basically every aspect of bass fishing. I like to look at it with a fine-tooth comb, and I want to know exactly why, what, and where, and every little in-between aspect that there would be for a particular technique, setup, whatever it may be. That's just the kind of fisherman I am. I really pay attention to detail. In the case of gear ratios, I feel like it's extremely important to pay attention to those details. Because the deal is you don't want to get stuck on the water fishing too fast or too slow of a gear ratio for a particular technique, because it will cost you fish. You will lose fish. I've done it I don't know how many times, and I knew better. But hopefully this video will help you know better as well. So the first gear ratio I'm going to talk about is the slowest one that I use, and it's a 5-to-1 gear ratio. This one happens to be a BB1, a loose BB1. David Fritz was really instrumental in this reel. He's a big time, super slow gear ratio cranker. So when would I throw a BB1? There is 2 techniques, maybe like a little more than 2, but 2 techniques that I really like to fish a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel. The first technique is cold water cranking, not just typical cranking, not, you know, throwing a 6XD on a ledge at Kentucky Lake. Cold water cranking, throwing a wiggle wart, a flat sided crankbait, a shad wrap, a lucky shad, all those really slow, thin body crankbaits in that early pre-spawn time period, winter time. I really like a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel. Something about fishing extremely slow that time of year will get you a lot of extra bites. The other technique that I really like to throw a 5-to-1 gear ratio reel is a spinnerbait. That kind of comes from Jason Christie. You know, I'm a creature of habit. I watch just as many videos as y'all guys watch. I love watching pros talk about their setups and things, and mainly because, I mean, if they're willing to spill the beans, I'm willing to watch, because I want to learn everything that I physically can. And Christie, when he got second in the Classic a couple times at Grand Lake, he was throwing an extremely slow gear ratio reel and throwing that big 1-ounce spinnerbait with a big thumper blade. And I've kind of incorporated it into my game, throwing 20-pound tests, you know, big line, but a slow reel, because, you know, the whole mindset there is to keep that thing really close to the bottom or ticking the bottom. But that slow gear ratio really finds a calling in my boat when it's cold. After that, I mean, I'll still take them with me. I'll still take them to tournaments, because there are some, those are oddball tournaments where you're out there deep cranking, and I'll have like a 6XD on a 7-to-1 gear ratio, a 6/8-to-1, and a 5-to-1. And sometimes that 5-to-1 actually shines more than the other two. But when you get on those real big time deep cranking tournaments, you're typically the faster the better. But in the case of a 5-to-1 gear ratio, when you're looking for that really low return as far as your inches per turn, cranking and throwing a spinnerbait are my two choices there. Now, if we go up from there, we go up to a 6/8-to-1. The 6/8-to-1 that I prefer is the loose custom speed spool. It's just a reel that I like. It casts really well. It has a dual braking system inside, so you can adjust the internal and external to make casting really easy. The 6/8-to-1 I use for a ton of techniques. Not that many guys use a 6/8-to-1 anymore, and it like blows my mind. Like, really blows my mind. So a 6/8-to-1, what makes it so unique is that it's that true in-between of a 5-to-1 and a 7. I can speed it up with my hand and hit that 7-to-1 constant retrieve because I'm reeling so fast, or I can slow it way down and I feel like I'm hitting on the upper echelon or mid echelon of that 5-to-1 gear ratio. So it's a perfect in-between reel for a lot of different things. So as you can tell, I've got a Series 3 rigged up here. I really like cranking a Series 3 on a 6/8-to-1. I just always have. That's just what I like to do. So as far as techniques go, I'm gonna break it down for you pretty easily. I like throwing my square bill crankbaits from time to time. Now there's times I'll throw a 7-to-1, but I'll explain that. But I like throwing square bill crankbaits. Early in the year, I like throwing my red-eyed shads on the 6/8-to-1. It's something, I just have the perfect retrieve that it just works for me. Okay. I like to throw my ball head jigs, throwing a swim bait like a rage swimmer on really light line. So I'm talking like 6 to 10 pound test on that 6/8-to-1 gear ratio. Another thing I like to fish with it is big glide baits. 6/8-to-1 comes in our Super Duty 300, and as you can tell, look at that big old glide bait there. Isn't that cool? A 6/8-to-1 is what I like to fish on my big glide baits. 25 pound test line. Just, it's something about that speed of that 6/8-to-1. I can hit that perfect retrieve every single time. And last but not least, deep diving crankbaits. When it comes to deep diving crankbaits, a 6/8-to-1, it's just the real speed that you really want to fish. You can get that right retrieve. You can slow it down. You can speed it up, just like I was saying before, and that is what's going to trigger those bites for you. I really believe that is important. I think that you can cover the spectrum from 10XD, 8XD, 6XD, and everywhere in between by using that 6/8-to-1 gear ratio. Now, one thing you did not hear me say on a 6/8-to-1 gear ratio is you never heard me say I fish a worm with it, a jig with it, anything that I have to set the hook with. I do not fish with a 6/8-to-1. I know, mind blown. There are some old school guys that still believe in that 6/8-to-1 on worm fishing and throwing jigs and things like that. I do not think at all that it's fast enough. I have had it cost me fish because I can't quite catch up to them the way I need to. Now, don't get me wrong, that's all we used to use back in the day, and did we have any problems? Probably not as much, but it still costs you fish. If it costs you one fish, it's too many fish. And that's the way I look at things. If it costs me one fish because of the equipment, then it's I'm not throwing the right equipment. So I was actually, somebody that really helped me mentally with that is Ish Monroe. Ish Monroe's a really good friend of mine, and we were out at I want to say we were at the U.S. Open, and he told me, I was flipping, I was catching some fish flipping. I was like, yeah, I think I can get away with this 7.2 rod flipping. And he said, man, what do you mean get away with it? I said, well, I don't really want to flip a real big rod, but I think this one will work. And he said, dude, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. He said, you need to flip what you know will work. You don't need to guess about what's going to work. You need to flip what you know will work. He said flip your 7.5, 7-11 rod, your big stick, and don't worry about it. Put everything else aside, because he said if you adjust your tackle too much, if you adjust what you're doing and what works for you, you're going to lose fish. And he's right. When it comes to what works for you, don't try to adjust and change up too much to where it doesn't work anymore, because that's going to cost you fishing. In regard to reels, that's so true. Couldn't be more true. If you say, oh, this 6/8 one will probably work on my football jig, and you go out there and lose a fish on it, you're going to regret it. And that's why I'm making this video, is because I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I've made. Believe me, I made plenty of mistakes, and I don't want you to do the same. So we've talked about the 5-to-1, we've talked about the 6/8 Now I'm going to talk to you about the 7/5-to-1 gear ratio reel. This one happens to be a HyperMag. Basically, all my 7/5 to 8/3-to-1s are all HyperMags or custom lights. So when it comes to the 7/5-to-1 gear ratio, this is my most used gear ratio. This is the gear ratio that I recommend if you're going to go buy one reel and one rod. Maybe it's a combo, whatever it may be. Get a 7/5-to-1. It is far and beyond the most versatile. You can do a ton of different things with it. A 7/5-to-1 gear ratio, no matter what reel it is, if it has a 7 in front of it, you need to look at that being that one reel purchase that you make. When it comes to the 7/5, I really like fishing topwaters, like I have here. It's a KVD Splash, because you can catch up the line really fast. Okay, I like to fish frogs. I like to fish. I like to flip with it. I like to throw a worm. I like to throw a jig, a Carolina rig, so on and so on and so on. This is my worm fishing, my jig fishing, my flipping, my pitching, everything basically reel. I will throw a Thunder Cricket on this reel. I actually really like throwing a Thunder Cricket on this reel. If I need to burn my lipless crankbait back in, whether it's a red-eyed shad, a rattle trap, whoever makes the one I'm throwing that day, I throw a 7/5-to-1 gear ratio reel. I think it's extremely important to have that faster speed in certain situations. Like I said before, I even will throw a 6XD on this reel if I'm on a very good deep school of fish and I want to change up the appearance or the look of that crankbait coming through the water. That 7/5-to-1 is a burner whenever you're cranking, but it will wear you out. The understanding of the 7/5-to-1 though, what makes it so good is it's that perfect balance of speed, but not too much speed. And I truly believe there is a such thing as too much speed. In the case of reels, I think speed kills. I think once you hit over that 7/5-to-1 gear ratio, if you have an 8 in front of it, or a 9 in front of it, or a 10 in front of it, you're too fast. You're gonna mess up your technique. Baits aren't made to reel that fast. Now, don't get me wrong, there's like 15% of baits out there that you can fish that fast, and that's it. There's like literally no other baits that you can fish going that fast. I mean, they'll burn out, they'll do all kinds of things. They do not work efficiently and effectively at a very high speed. And I'll tell you straight up, I am absolutely not a fan of super fast reels. However, I do have a couple of 8-to-1s that I throw, and I only throw them for certain situations. This one happens to be an 8/3-to-1 HyperMag, and as you can tell, I have a Hack Attack jig on it. This one happens to be a 1-ounce Hack Attack jig with a Rage Crawl. Okay. When it comes to me flipping deep hydrilla or flipping bushes with braid, big line, there is a time when I will flip an 8-to-1. Especially if those fish are eating the bait on the drop, and I know that's super specific, like insanely specific. But if those fish are eating my bait on the drop and I've got to catch up insanely fast to set the hook, I will throw an 8/3-to-1. The only other time I throw an 8/3-to-1 is if I'm bombing a frog and I got to fish the frog really fast. That's just where we're at. I don't fish it. I don't cast a football jig with this thing. I don't throw a 10-inch worm with this. I don't go throw anything else really with it. I either flip heavy vegetation or I frog with this reel, and that's literally it. I keep it extremely basic. I only have 2 or 3 of these, just for the fact that like they are so technique specific. And I've seen other reels out there that are like 9-to-1s, 10-to-1s, and I mean, yeah, you can get them if you want. I actually feel like they kind of mess up your we, as a fisherman, or as an athlete, whenever I was playing sports, you get in this rhythm. You'd get in a rhythm of how you ran, or I was a pole vaulter. You had this particular rhythm. If I changed it up and went too fast, it threw everything off, every single thing. And in this situation, I feel like if I'm fishing a worm and I'm used to fishing on a 7.5-to-1, and I'm swimming this worm through the water, if I put that on an 8-to-1, I'm going to be fishing it that much faster. You might be reeling the exact same speed that you would typically reel, but it really throws off the whole momentum that you would typically have. Like, instead of the bait being a foot or 2 under the water, it's like on the surface. I mean, it makes a huge difference. So basically, guys, that is my breakdown of gear ratios. I really think, I get, like I said, I get a lot of questions on, man, what gear ratio do you fish with this bait? What gear ratio fish with that bait? I hope this helps break it down. The thing is, I didn't cover every single thing out there. If you have a bait or a technique that you want to know more information on, just drop it in the comment section below. I would be glad to help you out, answer all of those questions as far as gear ratios. I'll also drop a link to every reel that I talked about in the gear ratio that I like to use it for. And like I said, have any questions, drop them below. I'd love to answer them. Once again, guys, thank you so much for watching my videos. If you haven't yet, hit that share button. Share that thing with everybody. I'd really like everybody to be able to watch this thing. These are some great lose reels. This is what I use, but if you follow the gear ratio guidelines, you're going to be able to figure out the exact reel that you need for every situation. Thank you again, and I'll see you around the corner. Around the corner? What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means.